So we've been exploring some Chain of Command Tactica, and I've been pushing up some vlogs, some podcasts up to my archives here, looking at heavy support choices, looking at the generalized overview of rules, talking about some of the stratagems, ideally, in my opinion, when to utilize your interrupts and command dice. And I wanted to follow up on a question that was looking at some of the heavy support choices and asking, what are the more optimal? I won't say broken, although, I mean, a lot of gamers like to throw around broken. This idea of in a wargaming system, it's a set of rules. We're looking to capture numerous complex operations. But at the same time, the rule set, it's still a game system. So certain things are inherently going to be a little bit more powerful. And look, this exists in every wargaming system, whether it's something that's really loose and fast and crazy and out there like Warhammer 40,000, aka zero playtesting, compared to something like Chain of Command, which is very tight and is very well done on there. But this idea of broken still exists a little bit. So building on that, what do I think is the most broken unit, the most broken support choice, the most broken setup in Chain of Command? I would have to say flamethrower teams, especially if it's a flame tank. I know from the perspective of the German army list, you can take engineering teams that have flamethrowers. I believe it's a 2-man team, but it's a small little infantry group that does make it vulnerable to return fire. It works, of course, if you can ambush or suddenly deploy and move. But if you get hit with an overwatch or an interrupt when you deploy, there's just not the volume of infantry in there, of men in there, to effectively stand up to that. Now you go against a tank, that's a different story. The tank has movement. In theory, it has armor. It's going to have a secondary type weapon. And if we look from the perspective of the German army list, the British and Russian being a little bit different, you take the Panzer III flame tank, it's actually not a lot of support points, not a lot of support choices in there to pay, simply because the armor value is so much lower. If you can fire that thing off, it's just devastating. So my thought on this, the range is extremely long. Now, most things in Chain of Command are essentially infinite, and that makes sense. I mean, a lot of us come from wargaming rule sets that artificially restrict your rate of fire. You know, my Space Marine can shoot 24 inches. Well, what? The bolts and the bolt gun just disappear after that? You know, there is a little bit of a balance with what you can do because it wants to encourage movement and kind of getting up close and mixing things up. But if we look at something like Chain of Command, historically, the ranges are really amazing, especially when you're shooting. You may be rolling one dice per miniature, but that miniature is utilizing a machine gun. That miniature is emptying that clip as fast as they can. On there, it's sustained fire. That's what it represents. And so the range is essentially, you know, short effective range and everything else. The range on the flame tank is cut down, but for the most part, given a standard wargaming size table and how fast it can move, that's not really a limitation. It almost feels like the range is too extreme on there. So that's kind of the first observation. The second observation is I always believe in rolling the dice in a war game, because anytime you roll dice, look, strange things happen, especially if it's a D6 based system. There's not always enough of a spread on it. So if it's that insane assault and you're going over the top and you give the orders to throw the hand grenades and charge in, even if you're outnumbered and your opponent's got machine guns and everything, I don't know, roll those dice. Stranger things have happened. That said, when you hit a group of infantry, a big group of infantry with a flamethrower, like, do you really want to roll the dice? I mean, they're pretty much done. Just if they're not outright vaped, the amount of shock that you're going to pile on is crazy on there. They're going to break and run. It's almost like once per turn, I'm forcing you to take a test, Chain of Command test on there. And I'm going to force you to blow your Chain of Command die to not have to take that test. It's insane. Okay, let's say going up against vehicles. The idea with tanks is, yes, positioning is important. Yes, facing is important. Yes, range is important, and a little bit of luck of the dice. But armor, is big. This is why, like, when I play my King Tiger, yeah, it's a massive amount of support points. But in a lot of the historical missions, going up against Shermans, or even going up against, I was going to say the Patton. I'm spacing on the open-topped tank destroyer that's on there. Even some of the American tank destroyers, they regularly bounce on that beast on there. So depending on the tank, you've got to get side armor. You've got to get rear armor. You've got to really have some dedicated anti-tank guns on there. Flamethrower negates that. Flamethrower hits it, causes massive amounts of shock to pile up, and the crew bails on the first turn, guaranteed the second turn. And it kind of takes the tank out, because if I gas you up, light you up the first turn, and I understand what that represents. You're in that tank and you just got hit with a dedicated flamethrower on there. I understand the brutality that it's representing, but we're just talking from purely rules perspective here. If it's broken, you hit that tank, I'm throwing on mad shock on there. You've got a junior officer in there. It's now your turn. You're going to spend those 2 activations to shoot. You got to spend those activations to take shock off. And then I'm going to hit you another turn, and I'm still going to smoke you on there. So it's just like, wow. I don't want to say like 2 flame tanks can eat through an army, but anytime I've run them multiples, because look, you want that redundancy in there, it is really, really powerful. The British ability to drop smoke from their mortar teams to kind of conceal positions, that's annoying. That kind of starts to change the game. It does. But at the same time, not like the ability, especially for the Germans, to be able to take this on there. What are your thoughts for it? What are your thoughts playing that type of unit on there, playing broken units? Do you house rule it? Do you allow it? Do you not allow it? Do you play specifically the mission where these were present or not? And again, I think out of all the wargaming systems that I enjoy, and if you've been following my podcast, I'm dedicated to the Emperor. I love Warhammer 40,000. I love Battletech. I love Wings of Glory. I mean, they're amazing, amazing games. But I have to say, out of all the rule sets of the games I play, Chain of Command is the best rule set on hands down multiple levels. I'm committing heresy here. I've even played Chain of Command with my 40K miniatures on there. We've gone kind of sci-fi Chain of Command with it. Very, very interesting with how it plays. Land Raiders take a whole new turn on there. But flamethrower type units, yeah, it's interesting. Your thoughts on it?